Our next panelist, Mrs. Cindy Packard, will address how even the poorest families can be empowered. Cindy Packard is a licensed midwife and the founder of Care for Life, a global nonprofit organization whose mission is to alleviate suffering, promote self-reliance, and instill hope. Care for Life seeks to preserve the family while encouraging and enabling self-reliance. Care for Life works with people to help them take charge of their own destiny, realize their full potential, and create a culture of individual efforts and responsibility.
Thank you, Susan, for that great information, and Annie, for their great champions of the family. I'm very happy to be with you today, and I'm grateful for each of you for being here and for the effort that you are putting into understanding these important issues about the family. Today I want to share with you why focusing on the family is the best and most effective way to solve the problems of extreme poverty in the world, and it can make lasting, sustainable change for the future. To do this, I need to tell you, give you a little bit of history. As she mentioned, I'm a midwife, and in 1999 I became aware of the dire situation of maternal and infant mortality in Africa. And I had a very strong feeling that I should go and see if there was something that I could do to help. So I went to Mozambique, and everywhere I looked, the needs were just overwhelming. At the time, 1 in 7 children died under the age of 5. 1 in 14 women died of a pregnancy-related complication, and only 47% of the adult population was literate. The vast majority of the people lived on less than $1 a day, and life expectancy was 48 years. Now, while Mozambique has achieved some significant progress since the end of their civil war in 1993, most health indicators still remain low, and especially in the rural areas. Mozambique is not unique in this. Most of sub-Saharan Africa, as many other developing countries in the world, also reflect a similar lack of improvement in key health indicators and fall below the goal of the MDG goals. So I went home from that first trip to Africa, and I recruited my husband, and we began to study what was being done to help the poor in the world and what we might do to get involved in that. And what we learned was pretty shocking. Despite billions of well-meaning dollars being spent in Africa, not very much had changed. And in many ways, those dollars, in a way, had made things worse, because we could understand how sending things, materials, even though they may need them greatly, often can create a culture of dependency, which is just the opposite of self-reliance. We also knew that most organizations tend to target a specific part of the population. They may work with women with HIV, or women who are abused, or children not in school, or even orphans. This approach may seem to help temporarily, but it's not really getting to the root of the problem, and often in itself creates other problems. So to solve the problems of extreme poverty, you have to work with the family, the core family, in a way that creates real, long-term, and sustainable change. We also learned that the orphan crisis in Africa is staggering. HIV has created a whole missing generation. When I started, there were 11 million orphans in sub-Saharan Africa, and today there are 50 million orphans there, with the numbers increasing exponentially. It was apparent to us that it wouldn't be possible for anyone to make enough orphanages or hire enough workers to take care of these numbers, and it wasn't the best solution anyway. Because families have been torn apart by disease, wars, natural disasters, and the effects of extreme poverty, vital knowledge and skills that should have been passed from parent to child was lost. And people were dying and are dying for lack of this basic knowledge. What happens to the future of a country where children don't grow up in families where they can learn these important life skills? So a different approach was clearly needed. So we at Care for Life decided to go into what we call the orphan prevention business. And every one of those children had a family at one time. And if that family had not fallen apart, then that child wouldn't have become an orphan and been left alone. So we decided to go back and focus on the family at the village level, at the community level, to help those families help themselves. Our goal is to break the bonds of poverty and help these fragile, impoverished families to become healthy, strong, and self-reliant. And we call this the Family Preservation Program. And we are succeeding in ways that we never could have possibly imagined when we started. So in brief, we tell them right up front that we are not there to give them anything. And that sometimes comes as a surprise. We tell them we're there to help them gain the knowledge and skills so that they can take care of themselves. And they won't have to be dependent on others in the future. To help them learn how to live happy, productive, and healthy lives and become self-reliant. Now to do this, they don't just need food or a mosquito net or a literacy manual. They need integrated and holistic approach to learning and mentors to help them apply this knowledge as they learn it. And that has to be done over a sufficient period of time. So briefly, we go into the poorest villages and we work with the whole village for 32 months. We teach classes in 8 areas of focus. So education, health and hygiene, food security and nutrition, sanitation, income generation, home improvement, psychosocial well-being, and community participation. And all of these are integrated to focus on the family and how to strengthen the family. As they gain new knowledge and skills, each family selects their own goals to work on in these 8 areas. They learn how and why to treat their water, how and why to get their dishes off the ground, to use a latrine placed away from their water source, and how to improve their homes. They learn about nutrition and how to grow a family garden. They learn about income generation and how to run a small business. They learn to read and to write, and they register their children and enroll them in school. From among the villagers themselves, they elect people in the village to be trained as volunteer specialists in these 8 areas of focus. And so initially, the Care for Life officers go with these volunteers to visit with the families in the village every week and help them to achieve their goals. As they achieve their goals, the families can earn a small one-time reward to help them get started so they can apply the new knowledge that they've learned. So for example, if they want to do a family garden, then they have to go to all the family gardening classes. They have to prepare their ground. They have to fence their ground area with natural materials. And then at that point, they can earn seeds, a hoe, and a watering can. Many families grow extra produce and sell it for extra income. Once the basic goals are achieved, they also learn how to set up community savings associations where about 20 families work together using their own money to give small business loans to members in their association. Those who pay into it earn interest on their money, and those who borrow from it are able to have the guidance of the group. No outside money is required in this way. And families learn in their community to work together to improve their lives and to reach their goal of becoming self-reliant. Recognize those families that have achieved their goals, and if 80% of the families in a community can achieve their goals, then they can earn a village reward, like a well or a bicycle ambulance. And this teaches them to start really caring for each other. If there's a widow that can't do those things, they'll jump in and they'll help her. We have a staff of about 40 Mozambicans, and they can work up to 9 villages at a time with about 1,200 people in the village. So it's very cost effective. After 32 months, they graduate, and that's practically the best day of all. And we leave the village because they don't need us anymore. And when we leave a village, we continue to monitor it for 5 years. We just do assessments there, and the results just keep climbing. And this is an indication of true behavior change. Once we exit a village, we'll pick up another village that's on our waiting list, so they're always in rotation. Now, we love data. We say we're data junkies. We like to evaluate our data, measure our success, see if everybody's doing their job, and make adjustments if necessary. At one point, our results were so good, we actually wondered if we were doing it correctly. A few years ago, we went to Harvard and asked them to examine our metrics to see if we were looking at the right things in the right way and if our data was credible. And for 1 year, they studied our statistics very closely. And they came away saying Care for Life has excellent metrics and detailed data that is far more extensive than we have seen in other NGOs. They also suggested that we tweak our indicators just a little bit to more closely match the international standards and the Millennial Development Goals. And at their suggestion, we are currently working with the University of Utah on an academic evaluation of our results using 2 control villages. And it's been interesting. We found out our results are probably even a little bit better than what we had realized. So just for a sample, I have all these available if anyone's interested, but just a sample of these. We monitor 53 indicators and over a 32-month period of time. So families using treated water went from 4% to 98%, latrines 14% to 91%, income generation activity, 20% to 82%. Literacy went from 42% to 79%. Use of mosquito nets, 25% to 96%. Family gardens, 8% to 53%. And as far as maternal and child mortalities, this is in 6 completed communities. We saw 77% decrease in death of children under the age of 5 and an 80% decrease of maternal mortality in those villages. People often ask us, how does that work? How do you get those kind of numbers? And I can tell you succinctly, we focus on the family. And let me illustrate this with an example. When we first started working in the country, the government asked us to assist them in training traditional birth attendants. And so we provided funding, we provided resources for the traditional birth attendants. And in a particular province, we went up there, and in this district, we trained, the government trained all the traditional birth attendants in that area. And they knew, they had great knowledge, and they had supplies that they needed. But we noticed, monitoring that district, the maternal mortality rates didn't really change all that much, and we didn't know why. So we went in and we started talking to the people, and what we found out was, even though the traditional birth attendants knew who needed to be taken to the hospital, knew what the pregnant moms needed, they weren't getting support from the family. So when they'd say, this mom needs to be transported, the husband or the parents would say, no, we're not taking her to the hospital. Or she still had to keep doing the job she was doing. She didn't get more food because training the traditional birth attendant wasn't enough. It had to go back to the husband, the father, and the children. So in our villages, we designed our program specifically having that knowledge that fathers are included in this, children are included, and everybody in the family knows a pregnant mother needs more food and more rest. Everybody knows in the village why a mother needs to be transported to the hospital. They're supportive of that. They get a bicycle ambulance to get her there. So it's a number of things, including that her health is better because of the other things that are coming up. I wish so much that I could just take you all there and you could see the villages and feel the difference that's there. Pictures just don't do it justice. But I'll try with a few pictures. So this is a typical village. This is a typical house, big rainstorm, wash away the mud, and they start over again. This is the same village, having learned housing construction. Most of that is native materials. The only thing they bought is the tin roof and the paint, really, and the door and the cement. So the most of that they did themselves, and they bought that with the income that they had made from their income-generating activities. Okay, this is typical what you see children doing there, okay? Instead of this is what you see in these villages. This is a children's club that the kids come together, they learn these things in a fun, interactive way, and the lives of the children are transformed so much. And of course, I have a million stories that I'd like to share, which is really where this comes, and I'll only share a couple with you. This is Anna Danza. Anna Danza started her own family garden and got her family involved, her husband, her kids, everybody's working in it because those boys wanted to go to the university. So she built such a vast garden that she had to hire people to come in and help her cultivate it and harvest it. She has her 2 sons now at the university, and she's made a wonderful success with just what she learned through the family garden program. This is Alfredo. His mother died when he was 12. His father died when he was 14. And he was left in care of these 3 young siblings. And his life was just spent trying to find food and some kind of shelter. He happened to be in the village when we came in, and he learned about goals. Goals isn't something most Africans really understand because it's a day-to-day existence for them. And when he learned that he could set a goal and do things to reach it, he just grabbed on and ran with it. So he wanted a house. So he and his siblings made 3,000 bricks, and they built themselves a house. He has gone into the brick making business. He sells bricks. He's also had such a great garden. He's the village family garden specialist, and he has a goal to become a medical receptionist, and he's getting married, and all of them are back in school again.
When each family in the community accomplishes the goals tied to these 8 areas, the families and the entire community achieves an unprecedented level of self-sufficiency.
We work with them and not for them. And we never do for them what they can do for themselves. We don't take the shovel and do the work for them. They do. They take the shovel. They plant the gardens. They clean the backyard. They buy the mosquito net. They start their small businesses. And when they do this, they increase in self-esteem, in self-confidence. They become more united and self-reliant. They feel committed to each other.
The changes in Care for Life villages are profound. A classic example of this can be found in the family of Ignacio Alberto Joaquim and Maria Augusto.
Before I was living in this house, and then through the goals that I have accomplished, I was able to start building this new house, and now I have a business. I sell pigs and also the vegetables that I plant in my garden. I am able to sell one part of them so that I can have money to support my family.
While income generation, a new house, and latrine are major upgrades, it was the changes from within that are so important to Maria. Ignacio was an abusive alcoholic. Maria was at a loss as to how she could survive.
My husband used to beat me a lot, and then Care for Life came here. The field officers gave lessons us. Now life is changing. He's no longer beating me. I'm very happy because now I'm living good with my husband.
So I hope you can see that the Family Preservation Program is preventing orphans and preserving families. It is built on true principles. It has clear objectives. It has documented results, and it has a proven exit strategy, which you don't often see in different approaches to poverty elimination. It's focused on families, and that's why it works. The mission of Care for Life is to alleviate suffering, promote self-reliance, and instill hope. Our program is replicable, it's transportable, it can go anywhere, it's scalable, it can be small or big, and we're willing and anxious to share this program with the world. We have learned some very important things in the 14 years that we've been working in Africa. And one of the most critical truths that we have learned is the very best solution for alleviating extreme poverty in the world needs to be focused on the family. When that happens, changes will be comprehensive, they will be lasting, and they will be passed down to future generations. By strengthening the family, you strengthen a community. And by strengthening the community, you strengthen the nation. And by strengthening the nation, you change the world. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nicolette Moody from UNICEF. I had one question for Ms. Packard and maybe a comment on what we just heard. It's really wonderful to see the work you're doing in Mozambique. If you look at the poverty rates there, etc., it's wonderful that there are people on the ground doing that. I'm just wondering get your views on how far you think organizations like yourself can go to reach scale in such a vast situation with such extreme poverty, and when do you think the state needs to get involved to support that, and to what extent have you worked with the state in Mozambique on expanding those programs?
There's a lot of action happening. It's just not very effective. And, you know, we're doing one thing and it costs this much money, where we could be doing a holistic approach that costs less money, that you don't have to keep putting money into the same thing over and over, year after year, decade after decade. So I think it's out there. The possibility is out there to scale this up. I think governments and states, they have a lot of money, and quite honestly, I think they're not using it very effectively. I think if we could somehow look at where that money's going and focus it in on the family and these few basic things that they need, once you get them on the first rung of the ladder, they're going to go and take off. Let me give you one example. When we first got there and we were trying to, you know, get some credibility with the government, and we had made a few partners, and one of our partners was World Food Organization, and they were giving food to families with HIV/AIDS, and they needed it, and they were poor and starving. But it went against our philosophy of self-reliance. If you're giving food, then who wants to grow a garden and do all that work? So we told them we were allotted 6 tons of food a month to give out, and they wanted us to give that out, and we told them we don't want that. And they were at first like, wow, that's terrible, how are they going to live? When we said they're going to become self-reliant. And so they were doubtful, but within a matter of, we said, give us 6 months with this village without giving them food, and come back in 6 months and you'll see. And they did, and they were astounded. Those families were feeding themselves, they had businesses, they had income coming in. And so now they bring their visitors and they bring them to our village and say, look what they did. And you know, I'm not saying there's not a time and place to give out food, but when you're trying to help people become self-reliant, that was counterproductive. So I think with some changes that we could all make in the way that we're addressing extreme poverty, we could take this thing far and wide, and that is my goal.